Alright guys, thanks for joining me on another one here. What I'm going to be doing this evening, I'm going to be getting the rear end ready for the new Atomwerks drop spring plates. I ordered directly from Atomwerks. What they do is they keep the same angle, but they lift up the actual axle by 2.5 inches. So that's how it lowers the rear end, so you get the same ride quality as stock. So what we're going to be doing here, I'm going to be removing the shocks and probably this bracket here. We'll maybe just leave this hanging. I'm going to be removing the sway bar, getting a new one here shortly. Just removing a lot of the suspension parts that I don't need or will be replacing, and get it ready for the new Atomwerks spring. So let's get going. Alright guys, so to get the rear shock off, it's really easy. You need a 3/4 inch open end wrench. Okay, go ahead and take that nut off on the top and the nut on the bottom. Then you're going to need a flathead screwdriver or something that you can tap the bolt out with, and then just hammer the back into that screwdriver as you push it out. The shock will just drop, and then you can remove those bolts completely. Save them for the new shocks because you will need them. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and take this shock off. I already have the other side off, and then I'm going to continue taking this sway bar out. This sway bar had two 13-inch nuts here and on the other side as well, and then you just push the sway bar towards the passenger side and it'll come out of that hole, and then you just have to kind of twist it back and forth and slide it out towards the passenger side. So let's get this shock off. Alright guys, so this was a little difficult to show in the car, but there's this set screw. You can tell it's an Allen key and there's actually a nut. That nut backs up against this flange here, okay? What you want to do is, it's actually a lock nut. Loosen that up, and then you can either get an Allen key and take this one out, or just keep twisting this till it hits the bottom, and eventually it'll come off, okay? So once you have both lock nuts off, there's one on either side. This bar comes out really simple. It's a little difficult, like I said, to show inside, but once you have it off, you can literally just slide that off, and that's where it actually locks in. And then on the passenger side, you can do the same thing. Okay, and then just pull this rod out from inside the car. So that's how that sway bar comes apart. I'm going to go ahead and save these parts. Probably wind up selling them. If someone wants to try to rebuild them, that's great. I'm going to put a different style sway bar on the rear. So that's how you get the sway bar off. So while I'm working on this rear end, I'm going to actually be replacing these bump stops. They come off really easy. Putting them back on is a little difficult because you got to press fit it. Now this one's worn out, so it'll actually go on a lot easier. But I'm going to be replacing them with the red polyurethane ones. So I'm going to go ahead and remove both of these, okay, and then tie the rear axle off. I'm going to strap this back to something back here, just so it'll pull it back when I remove these 3 bolts. I want to be able to remove it off of the spring plate. And those 3 bolts are 3/4 inch sockets. Okay, so you need 2 of those, one on each side. Okay, so this sway bar clip just comes right off. I'm going to go ahead and save it. The new sway bar may need it, may not need it, but right now I'll save it. You're going to need to remove this bump stop. Now, being that we're raising it up 2.5 inches, your new rubber bump stop you're going to have to cut down quite a bit. You may not want to run it. It's up to you. I'm going to go ahead and run it just so I have a soft bump stop here, but I am going to cut it down. So you're just going to tap this with a hammer or try to pry it off until it comes off, and then save it for the next spring plate. Okay, so as we're removing those 3 bolts, you're going to notice that the spring plate's trying to straighten out. And that's for good reason, because the spring plate wants to be straight. So don't worry about that. But I do recommend taking your top ones out first and then taking your bottom one out. Okay, before you take the bottom one out, you're going to want to get a strap to something. In this case, I have a bumper, a baja bumper that I'm going to tie it off to. Most cases, you can just tie it off to the stock bumper. It's not going to take much weight. I mean, just the brakes and the axle. So anyways, so now we have it strapped off. I'm going to take that last bolt off and pull it out of the spring plate. Okay, so when you get done, that's what it's going to look like. There's still a lot of tension in that spring, so you still need to relieve that tension with a some sort of tension bar. I'm going to actually make a bar that goes from the shock mount down to one of those holes, and then I'll just crank it down enough to be able to get those bolts off. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and loosen up the other side now. Alright guys, so I made a little tool here. It's a tool to relieve the pressure on these springs. What it's going to do is mount to the shock, and it's also going to mount to the spring, and when I tighten it up, it'll lift the spring up enough to take the tension off back here, so I can get the 4 bolts off. It'll lift the spring off here, so once I get the 4 bolts off and pry it out, it's not going to spring out. So I'm going to take this off, pry it out just enough to get past this lip here, and then we'll just slowly start lowering it back down, releasing the spring tension. The reason for this tool is for safety mainly, because bolting it on is better than trying to chain it up. I've seen many people use jacks and chains, and it just looks really dangerous. So let's get this thing bolted up and see how it works. Alright, so you're going to go ahead and use the bolt off the top mount of the shock, put it through, go ahead and stick the nut on. It can be free flowing like this. It doesn't need to be cinched up. Then go ahead and put the nut down the bottom, pick any one of the 3 holes. Fairly easy to do. So basically what I used here is an all thread bolt. Let me get some more light on for this guy. Alright, so I used an all thread bolt with a nut on the top that I welded on, and then I used unistrut. Okay, and unistrut's really easy because it already had holes. I was able to put this guy in the hole, fill weld here, run a couple beads, so that's on there pretty good. Same thing on the bottom. I cut a piece of round tubing that was roughly the same outside diameter of this. The tubing was inside diameter, and then welded that with a spacer onto this unistrut. Okay, and what that allows is to put the nut down at the bottom and be able to run the nut up and down without interfering with this piece of unistrut. So I'm going to go ahead and run the nut up to the bottom of this, and then we'll go ahead and just put it on finger tight, twist it once with a wrench, and that should be good enough to hold the tension over here while you pull this off. And then you can pry it out, and slowly, once you pry it past this lip here, slowly lower it back down. Okay, so now that I have that tightened up enough to take some tension off of here, you're going to need to get a 15mm socket, okay? And you can go ahead and loosen up those 4, okay? Once those are loose, then you want to pry this off of here, okay? Leave it on just for a time being so you can get it off that lip so it doesn't just spring down. And then you can go ahead and pull this cover completely off and just lower it slowly down. Alright guys, so we're going to be putting in new bushings when we install the new springs. They basically just go right in place there. See how they have the markings in this big wide open? Just line them up similar to that, slide it on, you're done. Okay, so once we get the new springs on, we'll be putting inside and outside of these, and it does come with lube. So at this point, I'm going to take this bushing off on the outside. You can see it's still looks pretty decent, but it is worn. I mean, you can see that it's pinched right there. But so set that aside for now. Now, there's a lot of built-up energy in here. Okay, and you're just going to want to slowly pry this down. Excuse me, pry it off. Of this post right here, okay? So now that it's at the bottom, I can go ahead and all the tension's off of this whole spring now. I can go ahead and take this off, and it should just slide right out. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and take this nut off and take this top bolt off. And alright guys, so I got my drop plates in. These are roughly 2.5-inch drop plates. So let's go ahead and get these installed. These are made by Atomwerks, and the reason why they're 2.5-inch drop plates is for this reason right here. You can see that they actually are raised up 2.5 inches, and what that allows you to have your stock angle and stock ride, but it actually lifts the axle up 2.5 inches. If you were to notch your plate, which is just fine, it'll work. You'll get your drop that you want, but you won't have the same ride quality. What will happen is you'll more than likely be bottoming out on one of these two spots, and it'll just be a rough ride. So by going this route, it allows you to keep your stock geometry, at least down here at least, but it'll raise up your axle 2.5 inches, which should keep your stock ride quality. So now we're going to go ahead and install my new bushings that I got. These are polyurethane bushings. I'm going to go and put some lube on them. I'll put one on the inside of this guy and one on the outside. Okay, and then we're going to go ahead and set this bottom angle at 21 degrees, and I will actually show you how to do that. So let's get the bushings on these things. Alright guys, so first thing you're going to do is make sure that the vehicle is at level or 0 in this case. Okay, if it's not, that's fine. You can just take the number that it's sitting at and subtract or add that to your final measurement. But it's easier to start at 0. In this case, I'm at 0. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and move that gauge over to the bottom of the spring plate. Okay, and you want to read 21. Right now I'm at 10. So it means I need to add about 11 more degrees on that. So easiest thing to do is take this, take the spring off, twist it down, and see if you can get the right angle. If you can't, you're gonna have to take the torsion bar out, spin it 1 notch, put it back in, and then put your spring plate back on the torsion bar. So let's go ahead and get that thing at 21. Alright, so I got 21. Dang, it was a little hard to see. It actually is 21 on the driver's side. So I'm going to go ahead and put the outside bushing on, and then I'll put the cover on. Okay, now with the cover, you can only put 3 bolts in until you get this up and over that lip. Okay, Once I get the cover on, I'm going to put my loading tool on that I made. Attach it again to here and the shock mount, okay? And we'll just preload it and be done with this side, and I'll do the same thing on the other side. So let's get this cap on and get the preloader on. Alright, so now that I got my preloader on, okay, got it bolted onto the spring plate and then also up to the shock mount. I have my 3 bolts on. I'm going to try and lift it up just a little bit so I can get that bottom bolt in there, so I don't have to worry about it popping off. And then we'll just go and keep cranking until it's at the stock location. Alright, so let's get going. Okay, so now that the spring is up above this little perch here, you're going to want to tighten all these bolts down to where this plate is tight against this plate here. Okay, and once you have that done, then you can remove your tension tool, and the spring is now installed. And of course, you got to put your axle back on. So once we get that axle back on, I'm going to go ahead and get started on the other side. Alright guys, so I got the springs mounted. Okay. Now I'm just going to be tightening up these bolts. Basically, you want to center up the bolts on the slot that's on the spring plate. That'll get it somewhat square for drivability, and then you can go take it over and get it actually aligned later. But that should get you right in the ballpark of getting it aligned. So that's what I'm going to set it at.